and that we have excellent candidates on the ballot.
Okay,
So
welcome
go
to our
ahead,
2-minute
Andrea.
forum. Recording has started. Jim, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Were you about to say something?
Yeah, I was turning it over to you.
Perfect. We're so well coordinated. Thank you, everybody. So we have two candidates for the shadow representative race for the primary on June 4th. We have incumbent Representative Oye Owolewa. Thank you for joining us. And we have Vice Chair of the DC Democratic Party and other candidate Linda Gray here as well. Thanks to you both for being here. The rules of the day are that we do have a series of questions that we have sent them in advance, and we'll alternate those with any questions that we see in the chat. We encourage questions in the chat. We hope for this to be a dynamic and engaging forum, and we will select them and sort of intersperse them as we can. So please do chime in if you're able. Otherwise, we hope that you'll stay on mute so we can keep the conversation going. We do have a Zoom timer. Each of the questions we will give, in the interest of keeping things sort of speedy, 1 minute. I recognize is not a lot of time. We will generally not be like hard and fast on it if it's like a couple of seconds over, but we are going to use a timer. So you will see the time click coming down. And we hope that this also makes it easier for those who choose to share any of these clips in the spirit of voter education on specific questions. You have little bite-sized snippets of information that you can share with others if you choose. So with that, the theme is very clearly statehood. I'm going to alternate the order of candidates in which we ask the questions to give everybody a shot at being first or second. And I'm going to say, let's start first with the opponent. So Linda Gray, I'll call on you first to introduce yourself, and then Representative Owolewa. And the first one for 1 minute, if you could please maybe introduce yourself and also highlight the 3 things you think it is most important, the 3 very high-level things in 1 minute that are most important for DC Democratic voters to know about you. Linda, off to you.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me. My name is Linda L. Gray, and I am a 5th-generation Washingtonian. I am a former biology teacher, former assistant principal, and really good and retired principal from DC Public Schools. I am now an at-large member of the DC Democratic State Committee. I've been a member of the committee since 2010. I currently serve as the vice chair of the party. I am a member of the DNC. I serve on the Women's Caucus as well as the Black Caucus. And I was recently elected last year as the vice chair of the Eastern Regional Caucus of the DNC, which is territory from DC as far north as Maine, and also including Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. And I am a staunch supporter of statehood for the District of Columbia. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now Representative, let me stop that. Representative Owolewa, your introduction and 3 things that voters should know about you.
Absolutely. First of all, I want to thank you, Andrea and Jim, for allowing us to be here to talk about DC statehood. My name is Dr. Oye Owolewa. I'm a child of immigrants, elected healthcare worker, as well as former ANC commissioner. In this role as representative, we just did that. Not only fought for DC statehood, but also amplified our awareness for DC statehood. We've done a great job in DC talking about why statehood is important to us, whether it's our local autonomy, whether it's how we set our budget, whether it's how Congress is able to meddle in our affairs. But in this role, I've also gone to West Virginia to introduce the DC statehood resolution. We're going to Texas to do the same. I use my background as a Nigerian American to increase the awareness and support for DC statehood outside of the district. And last but not least, we have commingled people outside of this country to really put pressure on the United States to grant us statehood. We're the only people living in the Western Hemisphere, in the national capital, without voting rights. We want to make sure people around the world know about that. So that's kind of what I've done, and I'm very glad to be here and be in this position.
Thank you so much. Since there are only 2 candidates, it is a little bit rapid fire to go back and forth between you 2. So thanks to you both in advance for your patience. But Representative Owolewa, it's back to you
Yes.
for the second question, which is more about the role. So there is often confusion or ignorance about what the so-called shadow delegation's responsibilities are and what you personally can do as the shadow representative. Could you please, in a minute, summarize for us what you see as the scope of this role?
Yeah, the scope of this role is to fight for DC statehood. And with our role, we are often confused with our Congresswoman, our warrior on the Hill, Eleanor Holmes Norton. Her role, her office is in the Capitol building. Our office is in the Wilson building. In addition, we could also use our role as a platform to drive change and increase awareness for DC statehood. I've done adjunct things like help returning citizens get their records cleared. We've helped minority business owners learn about contracts. We helped young people learn about future careers, but we use that to galvanize awareness for DC statehood, because it's not just our voting rights in DC, it's all aspects of our life in DC that's impacted by DC statehood. So when we're talking to people about expungements, we can talk about how, because DC is not a state, we have a federalized criminal justice system that allows our expungement or record sealing process to be a lot more stringent than our neighbors in Maryland, Virginia. We're allowing folks who otherwise wouldn't think about statehood to really champion these causes and lobby their legislators for a more fair and responsible District of Columbia.
Thank you, Representative Owolewa. Linda Gray, could you please answer for us what you think the scope of the role of the shadow delegation and your role as shadow representative should be?
The scope of the role for the shadow delegation, there's really only one role, and that is to lobby for DC statehood. The confusion comes, again, people think that they confuse this particular office with maybe Eleanor Holmes Norton's role, but I am not or would not be a voting member in Congress. This is a member, this position makes you a member of the Columbia Statehood Commission, which is different. It is not a part of Congress. But again, the role is to lobby for DC statehood. That is the one and only thing that we are charged to do. And if you do that job adequately, there's more than enough work involved in it. And also, if there's a threat, like we are seeing now, a threat to home rule, it's our job to try to fight that. It is all about being a lobbyist.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gray. And again, because we have the two candidates, the next question comes to you. What is your position on the DC government's funding for statehood today? And maybe if you have time within the minute, what specific statehood funding would you advocate for from the DC budget and why? Linda Gray, to you.
When it comes down to the budget, my understanding is that the funds allocated for DC statehood average about $1.5 million, but that's for activities. It's not necessarily seen in the office, especially not the delegates, but there is a shared staff. And so after you give money for clerks and staff and the initiatives, the things that you have to do, there really isn't a lot of money. There is some money, my understanding is for travel when you have to go to some places to advocate, but there isn't a lot. What I would do, that's a very good question. To be very honest with you, I'd like to get in the job, assess what needs to be done, and have a strong conversation on how funds should be allocated and how they can best be used.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And the same question to you, Representative Owolewa, your position on the DC government's funding for statehood and what specific funding you would advocate for if you were elected.
Yes, so my friend is correct. There's about $1.5 million allocated for statehood activities, but about $250,000, give or change, a couple of dollars to the delegation office. After salaries for shared staff members, it kind of comes down to maybe around $60,000-$70,000 to be shared amongst initiatives. If I were to have a magic wand and a limited budget, what I would spend a little bit more funding on would be for internships for young people. It's hard to tell a young person to get involved with DC statehood if they have all these classes and all these other competing interests. But if they're able to have a small stipend they can not only become employees and early change agents, but they also can take their advocacy to college campuses. We have young people going to college as far as California, and if they take the activism of DC Statehood with them, I believe we can do a better job with increasing the awareness. It's not just about what DC Statehood means for us district residents, but also how it can impact people in California, people in Texas, and what better way than to have college students from DC carry that message.
Thank you so much. Again, this one's coming to you, so I'll read the question slowly to give everybody a little bit of a breather. But clearly you've both been engaged in statehood over time and are coming to this role with some experience with the issue. But one of the questions on voters' minds might be, what have you done for us lately? So the question is to first Representative Owolewa, what are the top 3 actions that you are most proud of having already taken for statehood? Here's the catch, in the last 2 years. It's to you.
Yeah, I appreciate that conversation, that question. I've gone overseas. I went to Nigeria and I got members of that parliament to take on action on DC Statehood. They wrote individual letters. They put a lot of pressure on the White House to do so. I think one of the reasons why DC has 3 electoral college votes is because of international pressure and hope to do so as well. I sent a letter to the White House about talking about DC Statehood, and they responded back to us affirming their commitment to DC Statehood. I think that's important to have people on record, not just having silent commitment, but really being on presence for that. Last but not least, it may not always be a good thing, but I actually got arrested supporting DC Statehood. We did a protest and I made the sacrifice and putting my freedom on the line. We got a little bit of coverage. And it was important to show my willingness to put it all on the line for the folks in DC Statehood. A lot of my predecessors have done that in the past, and I'm glad and honored to be in their company in doing so.
Thank you
All
so
right,
much.
so I get to ask a couple of questions.
Sorry. Sorry, we need Linda to answer the same question.
After Linda answers.
Nice try. Linda Gray, the same question to you. The top 3 actions for statehood that you're most proud of having already taken from the last 2 years.
From the last 2 years, one of the greatest honors I had was to address the DNC. And I actually used my skills as a teacher. I gave a statehood lesson, and I tried to make sure they had a visual by using my own life timeline from how old I was when we first got home rule to now. The other thing, the most recent thing that I've done was this year, was to chair the retreat on statehood. It is important that when we go to Chicago, we have the right statehood face and stance and message. And so we had a full morning to talk about statehood in terms of its history, what we've done in the past, what we need to do in the future. And I also was a member of the Planning Commission for the March on Washington, which had statehood as a platform, and organized the party for that.
Jim?
Okay, now it's to me. All right, so another question we would like to ask you is, what specific actions do you intend to take to promote DC statehood and protect home rule as a DC elected official? And if you are leaving office soon, which is not the case here, please share the actions. I think we wrote this for Michael Brown. If you're leaving office soon, please share the actions you hope your successor will undertake. So let's just limit it to this. What specific actions do you intend to take to promote DC statehood and protect home rule as a DC elected official? And Representative, let's see, Linda, I guess you're first on this one.
Am I first? Okay. The 3 things, right? The 3 things that I intend to do to promote statehood is the very same thing that I'm doing right now. I am already on the job lobbying for statehood. I think it is extremely important, and I don't think you can get around it, but you have to go on the Hill. You have to go on the Hill. You have to talk to members of Congress. I've done that. I've even had 3 conversations with the President of the United States. In terms of protecting home rule. We already knew after we won in 2020 that they promised if we get the House back, we're coming for home rule. So one of the things that I think it is crucial is to encourage all elected officials, and I am including state committee members in that, to refrain from any type of ill-timed endeavors that send us to Congress for them to really ridicule us and criticize us just because they can. They have an opportunity to make us an easy target, and we have to stop that.
Okay, Representative Owolewa.
Yes, completely agree with my friend. I've been on Capitol Hill talking not only about DC statehood, but respecting our local autonomy. I've also called on our co-delegation and other elected officials of respecting the laws that are passed by us in DC. We don't agree on everything. We don't always get along, but we should definitely agree that we should have a united front against congressional interference. In terms of additional work that I've done, reaching out to state legislators across the country, getting them on board of DC statehood, because today's state senator is tomorrow's congressional candidate. Making those relationships early is important. For example, my good friend Jasmine Crockett, who I met as state representative, is now a congressional member who supports DC statehood. So forming those relationships early is critical because you don't have to lobby a seat that's already belongs to your friend. In addition, getting young people involved in this effort is critically important. After the pandemic, our world is more connected than ever before. We're talking and addressing people we've never been able to reach. And I believe that's an opportunity that us and the younger generation are able to utilize and take advantage of.
Okay, thank you. And now I have another question. As many of you know, the DC statehood organizations, there are a lot of DC statehood organizations that are all working towards a common purpose, but they don't always work together. So the question to you is, name the top 2 to 3 partners that you intend to work with in promoting statehood and what your relationship is with those partners today. Representative, I guess it goes to Representative Owolewa.
Yeah, I can give 2 or 3, even including this organization right here. I mean, I'm proud to be a friend, and I would say someone who's been able to be a small piece of the DC Statehood Compact. I'm really proud of the work that NOAA has done and the work that the Statehood Committee has done to support that. In addition, DC Vote, there is a new team led by, I guess, my friend Kelsey, and we worked together in the past on certain endeavors, and I welcome the opportunity again to do so as well. League of Women Voters, I have a good friend, Yelin, who's involved with League of Women Voters, and we are working on opportunities to not only promote DC statehood, but get young people involved. Most recently, I worked with Howard University students to adopt a voting center for the very first time on campus to not only strengthen our national democracy, but also getting young people into thinking and knowing that voting is cool and reducing barriers to do so. So having voting centers on different college campuses, increasing that conversation of civic engagement is something that I believe that can unify a lot, or if not all of our statehood organizations in DC.
Thank you. And now Vice Chair Gray.
Specifically, let me ask you, did you ask for outside other groups? Could you repeat that question, please?
Name the top 2 to 3 partners you intend to work with in promoting statehood and what your relationship is with those partners today.
Okay, the top 2 to 3 individuals or groups that I would work with. First of all, being a representative, I want to make sure that I have a very good relationship with the delegation. Right now, I have a working relationship with one senator. In the primary, who knows, that team may change. I also think that it is important to speak with Eleanor Holmes Norton, because that is the person who goes to the Hill, and that is the person who can best give advice on how to be supportive. The other and probably most important, and the one I'm most familiar with, would be the DC Democratic State Committee. We have done many things, made a lot of progress and a lot of strides in pushing DC statehood, and that work continues, and it's a very positive move for our city.
Okay. Andrea, do you want to ask a couple, and I'll ask a few more?
That sounds great. Teamwork. I'm going to turn to the chat where thanks to you all for starting to chime in with some excellent questions. Let me see. There were a couple of questions directed to individual candidates, so I'll take those first, and then I'm going to take I'll take one that follows. So the first question was for Representative Owolewa. I believe you were elected to position in 2021. Other than West Virginia, what states have you visited or reached out to advocate for statehood, and how did you do that with limited funds?
So one of the disadvantages of working with Noah Wells is that he does so much work and gets to so many different states. I've gone to one state and said we already got that covered. And what the opportunity I've been able to find is to go into red states, states that are not so friendly towards us here in DC, and really try to raise the awareness over there. So as I mentioned, West Virginia was something that I was really proud of. The next state that I'm trying to get into is Texas. Now, the reason why Texas is so interesting is because their legislative window is 6 months out of 2 years. So I could have a conversation with them 3 months ago, but I still have to wait for a long time for it to get to the door. So we have to make sure we get that together. I believe the next question was how I was able to do so on limited resources. I had to use my own funding. One thing that's unfortunate about this role, about being unpaid and under-resourced, is that you have to have the resources to kind of go on your own. So I've been blessed to be able to make these opportunities, but more importantly, I'm going to try to now also use the internet and technology resources to take me where I physically may not be able to go to.
Thank you. And a question from the same person, but this time it's addressed to candidate Gray. What are you doing to keep statehood in the forefront of the DNC?
Oh, that's a very good question. To keep statehood in the forefront of the DNC, I am very happy to tell you with the work that we've been doing. When we walk into the room, we no longer introduce ourselves as people from the District of Columbia. We refer to ourselves as the 51st state, or we refer to ourselves as the Washington Douglas Commonwealth, and we get applause each and every time. So what we've been doing has been working. The support is there. We have total support from every single Democratic State Committee in the country. And if you were at the retreat, you heard the chair of the DNC refer to us as Washington Douglas Commonwealth with the video he sent us for a greeting.
Thank you so much. Okay, question to both of you. Very topical. And I will say it has been already somewhat controversial because it was included in a candidate questionnaire that was sent to at least the Ward 7 candidates from the ACLU. This question is about congressional efforts to overturn DC laws and your position on them. So here's the exact question, and we will pass it. Again, we're bouncing back and forth. So Linda Gray, this one will go to you first. Will you oppose all, and all is in capitals, will you oppose all congressional efforts to overturn DC's locally passed laws and limit our home rule? And are there any is in all caps, any exceptions or policies that you would advocate in favor of congressional interference on? Are there any questions about the question?
It was long, but I think I can answer that.
Okay. Will you oppose all efforts to interfere? Are there any exceptions?
So Andrea, I have some questions about the question.
Okay.
And so I don't want to blindside these people on our forum. What are the all congressional efforts we're talking about, and any exceptions that we're talking about? I think we need to kind of tell people what and Noah, if you're on the call and you ask this question, which ones are you specifically referring to? Okay, we just got
So I hope I was clear, but I meant every single effort to overturn any of our locally passed laws.
Okay, so which ones are you talking about specifically?
We don't know what's going to come up in the next 2 years. So my question is, whatever comes up, will you do everything you can to overturn it, or are there any exceptions to which you will be in favor of that congressional interference for some reason?
Okay, well, I'm going to just throw out a couple that were controversial. So what we saw this year is we saw an effort by the DC Council to allow all residents in the District of Columbia to vote. That was passed by the DC Council, and that had a reaction on Capitol Hill. There was another one in which we revised our criminal code, and the criminal code was opposed by members on Capitol Hill. There's another one to possibly strike down ranked choice voting. That's another one that's pending on Capitol Hill. So when you're talking about all, please consider that there are things that you may agree with, some things you may disagree with, but do you have a general position against all congressional interference? Or are there some things that you may not necessarily, you might apply congressional interference?
That's right. So the question is, do you have a position on all? And if you have any exceptions, what are they? Linda Gray, to you.
We're fighting for statehood, so I am against congressional involvement. I am against congressional involvement. I think that the laws that we pass are the laws that we should be able to live by. I am opposed to congressional intervention.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Representative Owolewa.
I couldn't agree more. There is absolutely no reason for Congress to ever be involved in our local autonomy here. We're talking about Congress members who can't even do that in their own districts, let alone what they want to do here. Furthermore, when people tell me, especially in the district, that they don't support DC statehood because the way certain government elected officials act or whatnot, or way things work here, that's a reason to vote somebody out. And that's not a reason to disenfranchise yourself. So under no exceptions, under no opportunities, under anything I agree with or disagree with, should Congress be involved in squashing our bills. It undermines our ability, undermines our autonomy, and also undermines our intelligence. You know, we have some of the smartest people here in the district, and we have some of the smartest leaders here in the district. And I'm proud of having our council. I'm proud of the folks who make up our elected officials, even if we disagree sometimes. But our law should be determined by the people who live here, love here, and serve here, and not by folks who rent spaces here and aren't voted by us.
Thank you. I'm just going to keep reading from the chat because these questions are super interesting, and I really appreciate that people have been chiming in on them. Jim, just give me a signal if you wanted to take over on the reading front. But I'll just move on to the next one. This question is, what are your thoughts on partnering with third-party companies? It says companies beyond grassroots organizations that have the ability and the funding to increase publicizing our efforts nationwide, therefore broadening our reach.
And let me ask the person who asked this question, are there some organizations that you're thinking about that you are suggesting they get in touch with, or is this just a general question?
I don't know if Dante Daniel, if you're willing to chime in or share.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Dante Daniel. I didn't have any companies more so in mind. Maybe, you know, the companies that you more so see on a day-to-day basis, Facebook, Amazon, just companies that have broad reaches that may necessarily be able to publicize the efforts and more so, increase the mobilization nationwide, because grassroots efforts tend to be meticulous but slow, so I was just looking at maybe looking at some alternative methods, maybe some out of the box methods possibly, because I just feel this can honor if awareness was to increase, I think this would be more of a I think there would just be a more concentrated effort with this occurring. So that's
okay. Well, let me give you some examples of a couple of organizations that have gotten involved. Senator Strauss has been able to get involved with the Creative Coalition. So he was able to get out public service announcements all around the country, where he talks to a movie star and they say, well, what are you supposed to do? Call your senator. And then there have been, and then he's also gotten us involved in this unrepresented peoples of the world. So to you, do you have any thoughts on partnering with third party? I would say not only, with your permission, Dante, not only companies, but organizations beyond the grassroots, organizations that have the ability and funding to increase publicizing our efforts nationwide.
Question first to Representative Owolewa and then to Vice Chair Gray. Over to you.
Thank you for that question, Dante. And not only is it important, it actually is imperative in a role like ours that doesn't have outside funding and things like that. Not only am I supportive of it, it's something I've actually done. I partnered with Planned Parenthood a year ago to send out postcards to members or residents of certain centers like Maine and whatnot supporting DC Statehood. Now, the only thing about partnering with the third-party organization is that you have to make sure you align 100% with them. You don't want to take money or work with somebody that 3 to 4 days later you have to walk back that relationship. So I was very proud to work with Planned Parenthood. I believe that they not only do work for women and reproductive rights, but also members of the LGBTQ+ community that really aligns with our values here in DC. So it's not only something that I strongly support, it's something that I've been able to do to maximize the role amplifying our role for our fight for DC statehood. It's not just about how DC cares about statehood, it's also about how folks in other states benefit from having voting representation from the District of Columbia.
Thank you. Vice Chair Gray, the same question. Would you partner with larger organizations or companies for broader reach? Over to you.
Well, for me, I would partner with larger companies. Every time we go to a DNC meeting, we have companies, we have special gatherings of companies that have the technology to help us expand our message, and new technology, things we haven't seen before. I don't want to give away one of those companies, but I'm hoping that the party is going to be able to show you something that we've been looking at now for a couple of months, but it's just an example of companies and means that they have to help you get your message across. And there are some phenomenal ways of doing it using technology.
Thank you. I do see in the chat there's 1 or 2 questions that are more yes, no. So I think we'll save those for the lightning round at the end. But there is a little bit more of a challenging question. So I'll read it slowly so we have time to absorb the new question. Vice Chair Gray, this one would go to you first. Do you plan only to do the same things done before that have not yet led to success? Do you plan to do anything innovative or new? And if so, what? So the question is, what would you do that's new? Vice Chair Gray, I see you ready to speak, so I'll turn on the timer.
Yeah, I am, because I've thought a lot about this. One of the things that I think we need to do, statehood is not a Democratic Party issue. What I saw when the GOP was the first primary to emphatically denounce Trump, that showed me that we had opportunity to get like-minded Republicans to join with Democrats to go to the Hill to visit Republicans. It reminded me of a time when we had a city council comprised of Democrats, Republicans, and a member from the Statehood Party. And not only were they highly respected, they were liked. And I'm speaking of Carl Schwartz and Reverend Jerry Moore. And so I think that sometimes, in this particular instance, we can do something different by forming small coalitions to lobby. Again, the job of the representative is to lobby.
Thank you. Representative Owolewa, what are you going to do that's innovative and new, and maybe not repeat what has not led to success before? You are on mute though, so you're
Sorry, yeah. I think it's important to define what success is. Statehood isn't going to happen tomorrow, and we're not going to get any Republicans to support DC statehood. For political reasons, we might not even get certain Democrats to support DC statehood until their voters support statehood. It's an awareness campaign. It's not about going to Congress. I visited Senator Manchin, and he's a very pleasant guy. He's never going to support DC statehood. We have to get real about this. What we need to do is incorporate young people getting involved in this fight. last cycle in 2022, more than 50% of people under the age of 30 said that were eligible to vote said they voted. That is important. That is a new frontier that we haven't been able to get before. They used to say young people didn't vote. They do now. And with AI, with social media, we can captivate young people in a way that folks from yesteryear who thought that statehood wouldn't be possible can really make it happen. I think it starts with young people, it starts with technology. And if technology is advancing, so can we.
Thank you. Jim, I've been taking up a lot of the real estate here on the chat. Do you want to chime in with anything?
Well, I do have another question, and that is everybody brings their own little talents to these positions, and we recognize that these are volunteer positions. It's hard to be able to do these positions without much funding, but everybody brings certain talents with them. Linda, you mentioned you were a high school principal and you're able to use your training as a high school principal to lecture the DNC in one of the finest speeches I've ever heard give to the DNC. Representative Owolewa, you are practicing in the field of medicine. You're able to bring some of your talents that way to your position. But in your own words, what other skills, what specific skills can you bring to this job to move statehood a little bit farther down the road than we've been able to bring it so far?
Representative Owolewa, I think you're up first this time.
Yeah, I think something that I've been able to develop in my time as representative is coalition build. In this role, there is no template, there's no guideline, there's no precedence of what you can do. It's kind of come in and do the best you can. We've been able to get folks who are returning citizens. We've been able to get folks whose parents weren't born in this country. We've been able to get people east of the river who weren't always as involved in civic engagement and got them to the forefront of this issue. I think it's critical to be in this position. You have to make the most out of what you can have, what you have. Like Tupac said in the 90s, make $1 out of 15 cents. And that's something that I've been proud to do. I think that moving forward, that's something that this office has to do. We're never going to get the funding that we think we get, whether you're a representative or you're a council, or even if you're a mayor. So it's all about how do you maximize the moment with what you have. We have regular newsletters to build engagement. And something that I've learned how to do in the last few years is really how to coalition build, think outside the box, and get new eyeballs onto DC Statehood.
Thank you. Vice Chair Gray, over to you.
Oh, the skills that I have are always going to be the skills that I use. And as a principal, I had to manage a facility, children, teachers, programs, central administration, and a community. It's a thing of being able to juggle more things. And the other thing that I bring to the table is my time. This is a daytime job where you do have to go on the Hill because, again, this is a lobbyist position. You do have to go on the Hill. You do have to form relationships with people who don't always think like you. You do need to visit Congress, folks, and I invite everybody to please go to my website. You'll be able to see how I've documented doing that. And for the work that we've done to get all Democratic parties supported and helping us to push statehood, I think that I've already demonstrated the skills that I bring to the table, and I will continue to bring those same skills to push statehood forward.
Thank you so much. I think we're down to maybe like one more longer question and then a couple of like rapid fire questions. And so the end is in sight. Congratulations for making it this far. Let's see, there was a question that, another question that was asked. Vice Chair Gray, this one would go to you first. How are you educating DC residents about statehood?
The best way that I am educating people about DC statehood is and I found this out almost the hard way, is showing people what it means not to be a state. That is the thing that has worked for us. When people realize how subjected we are to certain things. You may not feel it on an everyday living, but there are certain things that happen to us that don't happen in other places. And I use that same technique with states. The other thing that I would like to do and make sure that we do is while home rule is being threatened, there are a lot of people who haven't lived in DC before home rule. They need to understand what life would be like if we lost home rule. It gives, I think, a more definitive visual and a narrative. And then people have a tendency to support what you're talking about and get on board.
Thank you. Representative Owolewa, how are you educating DC voters on statehood?
Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity to educate people, but it's more than just lecturing and using experience as a teacher. You have to actually listen to people, right? Because if I'm over here just saying, this is why it's important, this is why it's important, this is why it's important, no one's going to listen to me. I have to take what people are going through in real lives and have to attribute how statehood impacts them. For example, in my expungement clinics, where we help returning citizens get their records cleared, get them second chance employment opportunities, help them improve their lives, I tell them why it's so hard for them to get their records cleared, because DC is not a state. And when you relate to people like that, they understand it, and they say, this needs to change. How can I support this? How can I get involved with statehood? When I go to other states like Virginia, when I go to other states like Massachusetts, I tell them, if you care about infrastructure, if you care about clean water, having voter representation in DC helps us get us closer there. Whether you live in Anacostia or Southeast Boston, if your water quality isn't pure and we need another vote to make that bill a little bit stronger, that's why statehood matters. So it's really more about listening to them and what their issues are and how our solutions are actually in the same place versus being separate or parallel.
Thank you. Okay, I'm coming down to a couple of yes/no questions. Any surprises that Jim has up his sleeve, and then closing statements. So Jim, this is your chance to think of surprises.
Okay, here's a surprise for both of you. It's very expensive to run for these offices. You don't get the same kind of public financing that candidates for the council have. So how are you supporting yourself in the campaign? It's all public. It's all reported at the Office of Campaign Finance. But to the people who are on the call, tell them how are you doing this, and how are you going to be supporting yourselves going forward when you're serving as our elected U.S. representatives?
Representative Owolewa, this one comes to you first.
Yeah, I've been blessed to get some support. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. What we're doing is working, and we're building a coalition behind it. People have donated $1, $2, more than that, to really help us continue this position. You know, in terms of being the representative, we don't have plenary power. We don't vote on things, so people don't typically donate to our candidacy because there's no ROI on the other side, so to speak. We don't have rubber stamping approval. We can't approve any funding or grants. But when people believe in the work that we're doing, when people want us to see succeed, they really poured in not only their resources but also their time. I've been very grateful to have donations beyond what anyone's ever raised in this race, but it's not something that I, sit back on. I see that as an investment to continue the work that we're doing, whether it's immediate statehood advocacy, whether it's work that improves people's lives, that plugs in the holes that statehood has left for us, is really proof in the pudding and is really showing that we are building something, and I'm proud of the work that we've been doing for the past 2+ years.
Thank you.
But Vice Chair Gray, over to you. The same question about financing.
It's a very difficult process, and I am out here raising money the old-fashioned way prior to campaign finance and being able to use tax dollars for a campaign. It is rough out here, and so, but I am able to reach outside of the city for resources, and that is exactly what I'm doing.
Thank you. Okay,
Thank
a couple
you.
of yes/no questions that were in the chat. To the candidates, if elected, do you have plans to attend the National Conference of State Legislatures in Louisville, Kentucky on August 5 to 7? Yes or no? Vice Chair Gray? Or yeah, thumbs up, thumbs down, even better. Okay, so yes to Representative Owolewa, yes to Vice Chair Gray. Great. Next question, thumbs up, thumbs down. Do you support statehood for Puerto Rico and for other territories?
That's not yes or no.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
it's for nuance.
okay, then let's take it as a fuller answer question. Linda, Vice Chair Gray, 1 minute. Do you support statehood for Puerto Rico and for other territories?
Yes, for Puerto Rico, I do. For the Virgin Islands, I would, but they're not seeking it at this time.
Okay, Representative Owolewa.
Yeah, I believe they should have the right to self-determination. So if Puerto Rico wants to become a state, I believe they should have every power to do so. I believe that their certain situations a little bit different than us. We're the only ones that are paying federal income taxes without having a say in where that money goes. However, if Puerto Rico or anywhere else wants to become a state and they go through the steps that we have gone through, I support every single person being able to have their constitutional rights completely the same as anybody else in the 50 states, including us.
Thank you. Okay, we're at closing statements unless Jim has another surprise. Or is there another surprise, Jim?
We have 2 conventions coming up this summer. We have a Republican convention, we have a Democratic convention. In the past, nonprofits in the city have advocated for voting rights and statehood at the Republican convention, which is not something we necessarily expect you to do, but you're as a Democratic representative, but you might want to. But the Democratic convention is a big deal. And I'd like to know from you, I assume you're both going to be attending. Linda, you're a delegate. Representative Owolewa, you may appear as a public official. What do you all intend to do at the Democratic convention?
Okay, let's see. I think it's Representative Owolewa's turn again. Am I misremembering? Okay, so you're up first.
Yeah, one thing that I really appreciate about the DC State Committee is that we were able to get every state to be on board with DC Statehood. I believe the next opportunity is make sure that DC Statehood is a page 1 issue and not necessarily a page 19 issue. I think that I do appreciate that Joe Biden has supported DC Statehood. I just hope that next time he puts in a State of the Union address. You know, we want to make sure we move our champions a little bit further to more bigger champions, and those supports become champions, and those who don't like DC Statehood maybe be a little more neutral. So I believe there's a role for everyone to improve and also be able to show the advocacy for statehood a little bit more. I appreciate the work being done in the Statehood Committee, work being done by DC Statehood Compact, and I can't wait to continue to be a supporter, an advocate, and ally of such. And in terms of the Republican convention, I'm not scared. I'm willing to go anywhere. Nobody gonna scare me and tell me where I can't go. So if the resources and opportunity is there, I wouldn't mind going there as well to represent DC at the RNC.
Thank you. Vice Chair Gray, what do you plan to do at the Democratic or Republican convention?
Well, in terms of the Republican convention, the DNC has been following Republicans everywhere they go. So nothing about that will change. And I would have absolutely no problem going as well. But in terms of the Democratic National Convention, things are already in place. We have everything settled in terms of the arrangements we need to make for our delegates. But in terms of statehood, we're already putting something in place to have a large display. We want volunteers to be there, people who are not going to be delegates, to be volunteers to promote statehood. We have certain partners. We are planning maybe a DMV event with the leadership from Virginia and Maryland doing statehood event because they are supportive. I'm also looking forward to having the Eastern Region Caucus support statehood and just to be very visible. So we already have things in the works. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Thank you so much. We are running low on time, so Jim, no more surprises. It is time for closing statements. And so 1 minute to wrap up why you are asking DC Democratic voters for your vote. Vice Chair Gray, since you were the last speaker, it's back to you for your closing statement.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, you should vote for me because I'm already on the job and can document the work that I do to promote statehood nationally and locally. From talking to state party leaders, members of Congress, and the President of the United States who does support statehood for the District of Columbia. You need a representative who is available and who will go to the Hill, who will sound the alarm to fight to keep home rule, who will attend congressional hearings and oversight hearings, and who will work cohesively with the members of the new Columbia Commission. I said it 2 years ago, and I'm saying it again. With the insult and constant assault on women and treating us as if we are property, for women's reproductive health rights, healthcare in general, for affordable housing, crime, gun control, education, and all of the values that are directly impacted because we are not a state, it is time to change the team. Thank you for the opportunity, and vote women. Women need to be elected to office. Thank you.
Thank you. Closing statement. Why should DC voters vote for you, Representative Owolewa?
First of all, I want to thank you for putting this forum together. There's not a lot of opportunities for us in the delegation to really speak on the work that we've done, and you have always been able to highlight in the work that we do. My name is Dr. Oye Owolewa. I'm a U.S. representative, Washington, D.C., child of immigrants, and proud elected healthcare worker. I want to ask for your vote again to re-elect me as U.S. representative because of all the work that we've done together. We not only fought for DC statehood legislatively, we not only gone to other states and helped introduce DC statehood resolutions, we also got the young generation involved in the fight for DC. When we're looking at what the fight for DC is going to be in the next 20, 30, 40 years, we got to start developing the leaders in that group. We had to cultivate young elected officials. We had to cultivate the new young people that are going to become elected officials down the road, because it's really important for us to see not only what we're going to be of DC now, but the DC in the next 20, 30 years. Please reinvest that vote into this campaign, and please reinvest your time into this campaign, because every dollar, every vote goes back to the community. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And thanks to you both for joining and committing an hour on an otherwise beautiful spring evening to speak to voters and share your platform and your views on statehood and the role this, I think, honestly, despite being unpaid, critically important role, because we need every tool in our toolkit actively working for statehood. And this is definitely one of those. Future voter in 7 years peering over and telling me that it's time to start to wrap up. Jim, any final words before?
No, I just want to thank both of you for volunteering for this position and for volunteering to serve for 2 years as an elected representative. You may not get a lot of gratitude from others, but from Andria and I, we are very grateful to you for keeping up the work of statehood and for pushing for more democracy for the residents of the District of Columbia.
Thank you again. We pride ourselves on closing on time. We're a minute ahead. Enjoy the rest of this beautiful spring evening, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.